regularly. I cried. My car was repossessed, and my brother lived 10 minutes away, as did my mother. I didn't have money for food. I used to go to Sam's Club and pick at samples at 6:30 when I didn't have any food. I was poor. And when I went to prison, my brother took the apartment my father gave me. So when I came out of prison the second time, which I'll tell you in a minute, I was homeless and penniless and ended up in a shelter with a family who had plenty of money to be able to give me both my apartment and a way to start over. But families use prison as an excuse. It's not the cause, it's the excuse to make a separation. And probably losing my family was harder than losing my case, because I couldn't get over that I was that the money was so much more important than I was. And while I probably will never speak to them again, I have such great values, but I just recognize other people don't. So that's how I went. I went from rich to poor because I used all my money. And even though most of us struggle getting out, we survive, because if you survive prison, you can survive anything, and that's the truth. And that's why I come and talk, because I have that kind of resilience. So it's a terrible story, but it's a true story, and it's what people face. Not everybody. I think Teresa was fortunate enough to have a family that was supportive, but I'm not going to speak for them. I filed an appeal on my case, and 9 months after I was incarcerated in Alderson, in the unit we had a red phone. The red phone only rang for 2 reasons. Someone was getting a shot or punishment, or going to the county or in trouble, or immediate release, which never happened. But people would hear the red phone ring and everybody would yell out immediate release, because you had to have hope in prison. And I filed my appeal. My lawyer went to court. He said, this was in August of 2011, and he said, we did as best as we could. I feel good about it, but you won't hear for months, because they take months to write their decision. 1 week to the day, the red phone rang. An officer called me in, and I knew it had to be my case. And she said to me, you fucking ruined my dinner plans. You've been ordered out of prison by the Second Circuit of New York. She didn't care that I just won this victory. She didn't congratulate me. She wasn't happy. I was interfering with her dinner. To be told this, I started to cry, and everybody was staring, because there were windows everywhere, and people were saying, if she's crying, it's a bad sign. So I had to go like, thumbs up, it's a good sign. Crying, but I'm okay. And they said, are you going? You know, everybody like thinks you're deaf when you're 2 feet away and there's a door between you. Are you going? Yes, I'm leaving. People went nuts. The whole my unit went nuts, and they basically, because I was no longer federal property, they literally took me to the corner of Greyhound, gave me $30 and a ticket, and sent me home, and they had nothing to do with me. So I spent 2 years in the free world. And my conviction on the 4 counts, 2 counts are reversed and 2 counts are vacated, which means 2 counts they can never come back to me, and 2 counts they could. They dismissed 1 of the 2, they came back at me for another one. I went to trial a second time. This time I hired an attorney. I told him what to do. I said, bring an expert. All we have to do is show the bank statements and we win. He said he was going to do that. He said, don't worry, I've got it covered. It was a 1-day trial. I said, where's the expert? He said, I don't need the expert. And I knew before the trial began, I would lose again. And you ask yourself, why did these defense lawyers do this? Are they in cahoots with the court? Because you can't imagine why they would want to screw it up. So I went for a second time to prison. This time FCI Tallahassee in Florida. And I stayed there for 11 months, and I'm done with prison, but I'm currently waiting to see if my case gets overturned. Now, what I will talk to you a little bit about, because of the time, let me see. Getting to the prison is you guys have seen the movie Con Air, correct? Or no? All right. When, there's two ways to get to prison. One is to self-surrender, which they don't always allow you to do. And two is the marshals pick you up and you don't have a clue they're coming. So I'm in a nightie. It's not very long. And I see 4 people with guns at my window. And they said, open the door. And I thought, who do they think I am, Al Capone? I mean, it's like 1 woman and 3 men, and they're standing around you so that you don't move. I said, this is tax evasion. I didn't kill anybody. What are you doing? And this is how they are. And earlier today, we were with a third friend who said the same thing. When they come to pick you up, they treat you like you're this Colombian drug lord, and you've got 100 weapons and 60,000 pounds of heroin sitting there, and it's very, like, you have to, like, you're taken back by it. So they take you, and in prison, no matter where I was freezing. They give you a small t-shirt, a pair of pants, and when you're going to Con Air, they stand you outside for an hour until they gather everybody from the tri-state area who's going on Con Air. I'm only sticking this in because I think it's something people don't know about. It's not rich, old, or queer, but I think it's an important piece that doesn't get discussed. Is that okay with you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're standing outside with a couple of 100 people, looking at an airplane that you really hope can take off and stay up because it looks like crap. And you have, if there are 100 of us, there are 2, these are older people. These are, oh, there's a piece I want to tell you about Alderson before I get into this. I didn't tell you a big piece about being old in Alderson, so I'm going to take it back for a second because I don't want to forget this. Alderson is built as a terrain that has 1 level up here where you sleep and 1 level down where you eat. You have to walk 3 miles to eat. So it's 1.5 miles down to where the dining room is, and it's 1.5 miles up. And on this compound, which is one of the few minimum security prisons that there are, and this compound, you have to walk down what we call the Hallelujah Hill. It's straight down. I personally had to hold on to the ramp, which wasn't even built all the way, because it was so steep that it was scary. In the summer, the heat killed you, but in the spring and in the winter, the snow and the rain, this is West Virginia, you're in the mountains, it's mostly raining and snowing. So walking down is frightening for anybody who's older. Plus, you have to wear steel-toed shoes. That's just the rules. They don't want you working in the kitchen or landscaping or anywhere, and the shoes break your feet. So you've got this army of women who are walking down in soft casts, canes. They have broken toes, broken ankles, broken feet. And I'm not exaggerating. There had to be at any given day 20 to 50 women with canes, crutches. It was like, what is going on? And there's no way these women can, it had to take them a half hour to get to the meal. I mean, they had for women with wheelchairs a van, but for most people, no, they wouldn't give you van privileges. So you walk down the hill, you eat, and then you have to walk up the hill. Now, I was 60 years old in prison. And walking up that hill, and I was 60 pounds heavier than I am today. And most women who come to prison, if you started at a size 0 to 12, we're now usually 16 to 30. People gain 40, 50 pounds, and it happens to everyone because you're eating carbohydrates. You're having not Entenmann's, but bad chocolate donuts for breakfast, pie. This is your menu. Lasagna for lunch with a piece of garlic bread, and ziti for dinner. If you did get a piece of chicken, you didn't want to look at it because it was so dirty that you couldn't eat it. So the food, if you have a carbohydrate diet, you're going to gain weight, and most women ballooned up. They're off drugs and they're eating carbs. So walking up the hill as an older person was so hard for me that I had to stop multiple times. So if you looked up the hill, you'd see 100 women holding onto trees. The terrain was that hard and nobody cares. So what I will tell you in terms of being old is I was also, when I went to the second prison, which I'll get to now, I was in solitary confinement. And being old in solitary confinement is very difficult. So I have 10 minutes, let me quickly run through. I thought I wouldn't have enough, and I have all my pages here. Not done, so I want to tell you about Con Air because it's a part that nobody talks about. You get on an airplane and for some reason, the American the criminal justice system seems to think that if giving us bologna sandwiches 10 times a day, you will somehow be very happy over this. So you get into these, they give you a bologna sandwich when you're in the, not that this is important, but you wonder if who is making the money off this bologna sandwich, because that's all they give you until you arrive at the prison for 24 hours. But you're shackled. You're shackled in your hands, you're shackled in your feet. You can't walk. I couldn't walk up there the steps. Too hard. And when you finally do get in the steps, they allow you to take one bathroom run. So you're shackled, you're walking to the bathroom, you can manage to get your pants down, but you can't get them up. So you knock on the door and you say to the officer, "Can you help me get my pants up?" "No." I said, "Are you serious?" Because you can't. Your hands are here, your pants are down here. No matter how you turn, you're not getting the back part of your pants up. Because all of us walked out with the front part up and the back part down. And they allowed this to happen. And this is a plane of women in the front and men in the back. Then they give you a bottle of water and a box with bologna sandwich and cookies, all of which are wrapped. You have to open the bologna, open the bread. You're shackled. You're balancing the box on your knees. The box falls because you can't balance it. So you either grab the water, or you grab the bologna, or you grab the bread, or you grab the cookies before the box hits the floor. So if you look at the plane, everybody's box is on the floor. And they're laughing, they're saying, "You're a bunch of slobs." And you want to say to them, "Fuck you. You could help us. You could loosen this. You could give us something that we can eat, and you're starving." But they don't care, and you can't show attitude, because if you do show attitude, it gets worse. Now I'm going to skip some parts and go to solitary confinement. And then I'll stop the questions. What I did in prison both times was interview women about why they were in prison, which is not legal to do, but that's what I did every day. They used to call where my bed was the office, and people would sneak over, and you'd have one pen, and you'd hope it didn't run out, and I would write their stories, their names, their case numbers, and then who was ever leaving the prison, you'd put a package together so they mailed it from the outside, because if you put anything like this in outgoing mail, they'll read it and they'll rip it up. So you had to sneak this stuff out. So the first time, I did a lot of that kind of writing and had everybody's case. The second time, I had already built a website called exoffendernation.com, which is, I lost most of the site, but if any of you want to look on it and subscribe, that would be great. The second time I was writing blogs and sending them out of prison, mostly through snail mail. It was too dangerous to send a blog out through email. But on this one particular occasion, something happened that pissed me off enough that I wanted to send it to the email because I wanted it blogged. We had a physician's assistant. That's who runs medical. There's no doctors there. There's no regular nurse. There's physician's assistants. This physician's assistant told all 1,100 women who came in for cysts, cancer, bleeding, headaches, seizures, the same thing. You're fat, you need to walk on the track, you need to drink water. That's all he said to every single woman. Nobody got And if you needed medication, whether it was a migraine or a cyst or a seizure or cancer, you got an allergy pill. And that was it. That's the only thing he'd say, and you had to buy it at commissary. So one woman came to see him. Her name is Miriam Hernandez. And she was in such severe pain that she begged him to check her out, to send her out to be looked at. He said, "You're fat, walk on the track, drink water." 2 weeks later, her gallbladder burst, and she was dead. I reported this story, and I was so upset by it that I did it through the email. Email went out, blog went up. Within less than an hour, I was picked up by the police, shackled, and thrown into solitary confinement, and told that if I write about an officer, I was supposed to go home. That was canceled. They kept me for a little under 2 months. If prison was stressful, solitary confinement challenged my very being. I did not know from hour to hour if I would make it out of solitary confinement. Because what I will tell you is, from the moment you're arrested to the moment you're in trial to the moment you're incarcerated to even when you're released, you have suicidal thoughts. You may not act on them, but there's nobody who goes through this that you may not say to yourself, "I want to take a gun," but you say to yourself, "If I died, it would be okay, because dying would be easier than this." And there's not a soul who would say, well, maybe a handful, but you feel that way. And when I went to solitary, I'm claustrophobic, so being behind a locked door was frightening. They give you, it's fluorescent lights again, it's freezing, you get one t-shirt and a jumpsuit, and if you're not warm enough, you take the one little blanket you have, but you are freezing. And to be older, to be exposed to stress, to be exposed to the lights, to be exposed to all of this, I had migraines, I had vertigo, my blood pressure was 200/100, and they said to me when they finally took it, we make more money if you're dead. They don't care. Now, I'm getting close to the end of the time, so I'm just going to check and see. What I'll say to you is I can do a whole separate talk on solitary confinement, which Andrew has heard. It is a place where you have 60 to 70 women locked up for having an extra apple in their locker. And if you have vitamins and you've been given them, and there are 30 vitamins and you don't take 3, so you're off by 3 days, that's a drug charge. If they think you have an extra battery, it could be a security charge. I was in solitary because I was considered a security risk because I wrote about an officer. They can call it anything. Now I'm going to stop this short so you can ask me some questions, but that's a piece of my history, and I hope you got something out of it. So anybody have you all tired, or have I bumped you out? Someone has some question. You. No, I'm just giving you a hard time. Anything you want to ask me about that I haven't mentioned, or anything go ahead.
Do you think that the recent, just with like obviously there's been a lot of issues around race and incarceration recently, do you think that is anything that could create a change in the system? And if so, how do you think that would come about?
I think it's not a recent issue. I think they incarcerate black people. I think when you have 70% or 60% of the prison black, it's obvious when you walk in prison who they're incarcerating. And you're dealing with a lot of women being incarcerated. Typically, if you've got, 60% of the prison is drugs. So if you pick up someone who's on a drug case and they're facing 40 years, the only way they get to knock that down 20 years is by giving them 20 people. They give the girlfriend who was sitting in the car, the girlfriend's mother, the cousin, and so all these, I met 19-year-old girls in prison facing 15 years, 10, 15 years for not understanding the risk they were taking by getting into a car with someone they shouldn't have. Do I think that race is the issue? There's no question. Will this country face that? It would take a whole, I told you I told you that I believe that, I'll take it one step further. If you look at the last 40 years, we've lost our middle class. If you look at the last 40 years, the 1% has become unbelievably rich, while most of us struggle. And when I came out of prison, the only job I could get, and I still don't have a job. I'm out of prison 4 or 5 months. I worked at Old Navy for $9 an hour. And when you work for Old Navy, if they say you're gonna get 8 hours in a day and the store's not busy, they send you home. So you come at 9, they send you home by 10. So we have had a structural change in American society because of prison. And that is what has to come out. The prison industrial complex is very real. It's one of the greatest assets people have, and it's impacting people of color. I mean, I'm an oddity in prison, and I use it to tell the story. I know the benefits of me talking, but what you have to do is understand that this is done on purpose. Where else are you going to get? Do you understand that with 2.5 million people, we make 12 cents or 6 cents or 20 cents an hour? We are providing services for the who's who of Fortune 500 companies. The collection of prisons across this country are, from Apple to Microsoft to everyone, we do something. We stuff boxes, we make clothes, we are on the phone for them, so they don't have to go to Indonesia. Prison labor is 2 million people. Even if they only use half of us, that's a 1 million-person labor force. Who do you think is in there? Who are they going to get? It's just slavery by a different name. It's not different. And it has to change. I struggle with how to, I could go in front of a computer and trade on Wall Street. I can't. I'm so personally offended by what I saw and what I experienced and what they did to me and what life is, that I have to do something to impact change. And so does everybody. So yes, race is the issue, and I don't think a lot of, and I really don't want to do the opposite of what people do, so I really don't want to say, put a bunch of white men out of business. I don't want to say that because that's playing the exact same game. But they have to be held accountable, and we have to go after these businesses.
What do you see as like the weakest leg of the prison complex that you're looking to attack? Like, what's the first step and what's the end goal?
That's a good question. I changed my mind about that a lot. The reason I'm doing the project I'm doing is because I was radically affected in 1980 when all of my friends died of AIDS. I mean, I lived in an apartment building on Greenwich between Christopher and 10th, the heart of the village, and literally everybody was dying, and Reagan was saying, no drugs. And then I saw ACT UP get into the community and start acting up. But I also saw that the movie Philadelphia with Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks had an important impact. And I continue to believe and it's not the only one, this is just personally, I believe the American public has to know, and they don't. They really don't know. They don't have a clue of how horrible it is. So I think that if you can make documentaries, and I'd hate to see a slew of documentaries be identical. I think you need some powerful film to stick in people's faces, to do what even Al Gore's Bad movie did for climate change. You have to bring awareness. I mean, I thought that was a boring movie, but I appreciate it. I couldn't watch the whole thing. It's like, oh, really? Okay. But, they're preaching to the choir with me. So, but the movie did something. So I believe that's one way of tackling it. Another way of tackling it is to shame every business. You have to it's easy, we know who the businesses are. This is not rocket science. You take a half a dozen activists from across the country, you get a list. It's not it's not only the people who do business, like CCA and GEO, you know, not those, you want to get those people out of business. That's one, the private prison people. They're a disaster because they operate no frills and they're killing people, literally. So you want to get them out of business, but you also can shame Microsoft and everybody into not using prison labor. But that might mean that they'll just go abroad and do it. But somehow you have to get a conscience. And I mean, personally, I'd be demonstrating in front of each office. I would shame them all for having given any prison any business. And there are monopolies. When I went to prison, one of the funny, they give you a little package of toiletries because you walk in and you have nothing. So, hold on a second. So the name of the deodorant was Maximum Security, which cracked me up. I thought, they're actually giving me deodorant that's called Maximum Security. Well, the funniest thing I ever saw. I brought it home. I just walked around with it. The toothbrushes that they give you are this big. You put your thumb in it, and you brush one tooth, and it falls apart. It's really charming. So I wanted to look up who owns this shit. So the name that came up, it's on there, is Bob Barker. Now I love Bob Barker. He loves animals. I'm an animal person. I said, can't be Bob Barker. Can't be the Bob Barker of Price is Right. Can't be the Bob Barker of, you know, who is an animal activist. Sure enough, there was a Bob Barker who is a North Carolina state senator. I looked it up as soon as I came home. And their family earns $400 to $600 million a year by giving just the toiletries and some of the clothes. And he's had this monopoly for 40 years. So you tell me, do you know anyone else lucky enough to have a prison monopoly? And why? Why? Expose this company and let other people expose these people. That's why I want to do interviews, because in addition to the regular facts that you put in a cop-out, it's called a cop-out, it's just a piece of paper saying I need to see a doctor, I need to see a dentist. I put in a cop-out to get a tooth fixed. This is 2010. I have a copy of what they sent me. It says there's a waiting list from 2007. I said, what? I have a 3-year waiting list for a tooth that's coming out? And all they do is pull your teeth anyway. So in answer to your question, Bob Barker, I'd want to go after, we know who these companies are. Those of us who are formerly incarcerated are the best voices to tell you, because we saw who makes the toilets that you can't sit on. We saw who did, and we took notes. Many of us know, and many of us are out there working, but most of us are poor. Most of us are struggling. So we do it in spite of the odds, or we do it in spite of everything. Go ahead.
So last week, I noticed that Governor Terry McAuliffe of Virginia issued an executive order implementing ban-the-box legislation for the state of Virginia. So now there's like over 10 states and a bunch of cities. What is your opinion as somebody who was formerly incarcerated about on job prospects after or release, both, I guess, in the ban-the-box states and not ban-the-box states?
I don't think ban-the-box. I mean, I have a more radical posture than my friend. She's laughing. I have probably the most radical posture. You know, even though I'm old and queer, I have the most radical posture. I think that it's bullshit. I think it should be done, but all they have to do is Google me and they find out. I mean, if you think people don't Google people, you're mistaken. They can find out anything. So even if they ban you telling them, the truth is, how are you going to explain 8 years of missing life? You're in an interview, so let's get real. I've lost 17 years of my life. I fought my case. 2 of those years I was in prison. And during those years, instead of being at a job or doing something, I had years to explain. Unless you have a short time, like 2 years, anybody who's done 5, 8 years does not have a resume. So you could be as creative as you want, but it's gonna come out that you were incarcerated. And what will save us is that something Teresa told me on our way in, which is that money is being thrown by bipartisan groups towards entrepreneurship, which will mean that 5 out of 100 of us might make it. Okay? Because remember, in this classroom, if everybody was given $100,000 tomorrow to start a new business, how many do you believe will make it? You take a wild guess. 4. Okay, so you're on my, I'm saying the same thing. In this room, 4 or 5 people will make it, and the rest will do their valiant effort. So even if you offer those opportunities, you're dealing with people that, many of whom never used a cell phone, many of whom don't have a facility with social media, many of whom, you can't make that time up. It's just costly. So I believe a special program needs to be developed where businesses are, you know, you should be able to go to the New York Yankees or the Mets or wherever you're from and say, give 10 jobs. Put 10 jobs aside for formerly incarcerated people. That would be my solution. Go to companies, not the $9 jobs. I don't care if it's Merrill Lynch or if it's the New York Yankees or if it's Modell's, but put somebody in a job track. That's giving someone a second chance. Without a job, we can't afford a house or even an apartment. I came out of prison and had to go to a 3-quarter women's shelter. It was scary. The women in there was no heat, and women were opening the oven and putting the oven on high and smoking a cigarette next to it. And I said, are you nuts? You blow up the place. Every day I thought, what? They're freezing. So that was their solution. You have to give us jobs or a chance. Throwing money at us means 5 will make it. And me, I have a resume, but my age is prohibiting me in a large part from getting any job. And there's no trust fund. So unless I make money in the next 10 years, the 10 after that are a serious problem. You have a significant population coming out of prison or in prison who are my age. You're talking about in the 80s, they threw, my friends the hippies, who had pot in prison. People who are in prison for pot. They're going to come out of prison 70, 75 years old. What are they going to do? There's no place for them. There's no place for them to come. It's a problem because we don't take care of each other as a culture. We don't have something that we need and maybe never had, but I fantasize that people will care. Anybody? So I'm sorry to disappoint you on Vanderbox.
All right. I think on that note, it's actually a rather depressing note to end on.